Hello, everyone. This is Beyond 100 Days, where we probe and explore activities of elected government officials in Nigeria. You can join the conversation right now on X, formerly Twitter, with the hashtag Beyond First 100 Days. Remember to tag at TVC News NG. From G20 to G77, that's the situation right now in Nigeria. President Bola Tinubu just returned from India, where he secured a $14 billion investment pipeline during his presidential roundtable with Indian investors, as well as getting some renewed economic collaboration with countries like the United States, South Korea, and Germany, amongst others. Now, the Vice President Kashim Shettima has left Nigeria for the G77+China Leaders Summit in Havana, Cuba, on behalf of President Tinubu. The summit is scheduled to take place from September 15th to 17th. We understand that the focus of this summit revolves around the theme current development challenges, the role of science, technology, and innovation, and it's being overseen by the Cuban president, who serves as the G77's chairman. Vice President Kashim Shettima is to participate alongside global leaders such as Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, in discussions concerning development issues predominantly affecting countries in the global south. The Vice President will, on the sidelines of this summit, hold bilateral meetings with other world leaders to promote Nigeria's trade and investment relations in line with the economic development diplomacy of President Tinubu's administration. Kashim Shettima is joined on this journey by various officials, including Abubakar Kyari, the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Uche Nnaji, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, as well as Adamu Lamua, who serves as Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, among quite a number of other government officials. To walk us through what the benefits are for Nigeria and indeed Nigerians, I'm joined by Chief Economist, SPM Professionals Paul Alaje. He joins me live from the United Arab Emirates. Mr. Alaje, thank you for joining us on the program this hour. We're looking at a coalition of over 100 developing countries here, with 80% of the world population, and their aim is to promote their members' collective economic interests and also creating a joint negotiating capacity within the United Nations. Let's begin with how you think this group has achieved its goals in the past 6 decades of its establishment.
Well, thank you so very much for having me. Good evening. Opinion varies across the world, even experts, regarding the activity of G77. As we speak, nearly over 130 countries are members of G77. And like you rightly mentioned, the purpose of this is for economic development of these countries. While some people believe that G77 members have achieved some level of success when it comes to negotiating economic development of their members, many others believe that G77 have done less in terms of the capacity and the population, the numbers. In fact, many believe that their negotiators don't even know what their compromises will be in order to achieve some of their desires.
So let's focus on the sideline events there, particularly the negotiations we expect the Vice President to have with investors and relations in line with the President's economic development diplomacy. We've seen quite a number of that from when the President went to France, and then the latest trip he had to India, where he struck some very juicy deals in the area of investment back at home. What's in this for Nigeria, particularly when you see that we're not talking about the G20 now, we're talking about fellow developing countries of the world?
Well, developing countries have a lot to do in common. When you look at trade among developing countries, it is really very low. Some developing countries have expertise in some areas. Countries such as India, which is now the largest country in the world, is not more China. And if you see technology growth in India is significantly and sporadically growing. What can Nigeria learn from India, for instance? You notice that a lot of things is putting Nigeria and India together. The president, Bola Tinubu, has just left the G20 meeting where some level of negotiation we hear are on the way, which of course will lead to the development and economic growth of Nigeria. We have many more countries that are classified as developing countries. Predominantly, these countries are Southern American countries, some parts of Asia, a majority, virtually all the countries within the African continent are all parts. We're talking of nearly or over 80% of the global population, which means we have a sizable market. We have a notable market. The challenge many parts of the world has with G77 is, can we produce ourselves? Can we grow by ourselves? Can we induce decision ourselves? And most importantly, when it comes to security power, which of course separate from economy.
We may have temporarily lost connection with Mr. Laji, but we'll reconnect with him shortly, particularly as we explore what Nigeria must do differently, having secured some of this deal. We lost you for a minute. You can go ahead, Mr. Laji. Mr. Laji, if you are there, I'm interested in knowing what Nigeria should be doing differently with all of these potential investments that we're looking at. In India, for instance, the president talked about a $14 billion investment pipeline he secured at the presidential roundtable with Indian investors.
Well, fantastic thing to consider. There are a lot of countries that are doing a little bit better or relatively better than Nigeria. And when it comes to investment, they have some of their nationals with the capacity to come invest in Nigeria. I think what the Vice President Kashim Shettima should be pushing for is inflow into Nigeria. If you ask me what's the biggest challenge we have today as a country, as an economy, it is FX inflow is responsible for high inflation. And if we borrow in hard currency, it's even going to put us in worse shape. We need to earn FDI, or most importantly, foreign direct investment and hard currency legitimately without necessarily borrowing. That is why perhaps we have seen President Bola Tinubu, taking the lead in canvassing investment in Nigeria and also not exempting the G77 in this case, which the vice president, of course, has taken the lead in this instance to ensure that we have more. For what we know, Nigeria has sizable population, and the population, if you ask me, is youthful in nature. How do we bring in investment into different sectors in Nigeria, especially among developing countries? And can we, as developing countries, start looking at growing together, growing without excluding any of us? And I can tell you, if we patronize ourselves alone, if we do business with ourselves, then we can see some level of development and economic growth among ourselves. I also ask, there are countries that are developing, but have had some solution in terms of power supply is now stable in some country. We have also seen cost of energy. Some countries have been able to bring technology to solve security challenges. Can we learn from one another so that things that are causing economic woes in some countries, other countries such as Nigeria and a few others, can learn from them?
I hear you, Mr. Laji. You're saying there's a lot to gain from the G77, particularly when you consider that they cover 80% population of the world. And we've also heard government talking about the power of foreign direct investment and the trade relations occasioned by many of the trips we've seen Mr. President take in the past weeks. But are these short or long-term impact on the economy? Because Nigerians are concerned about how soon will we begin to see the impact of this?
Well, I can tell you that the impacts will come in the medium term. Will they come in the short term, talking about 6 months or 2 years? Well, it may not exactly be because of the processes, international laws that may serve as bottlenecks. But in the medium term, if we truly put forward our best negotiator and canvassers for investment in our country, and we have them spread all over the country, even abroad, I sincerely believe that this will ease the current economic pressure, economic quagmire, and at best, save us from going further in economic downturn in the near future. So I am really very hopeful. provided we can use our best among us to push forward and canvass the Nigerian agenda. Everybody wants to manufacture where you have the lowest labor cost. I can tell you today, with the exchange rate, Nigeria is one of the places where you have cheapest or affordable labor cost around the world. Even if minimum wage goes to 100,000, how much is that in dollars? Even if minimum wage is 150, how much is that in dollars? And a global investor will compare what is regular overhead will be labor cost. How much is land in Nigeria and how much is it here in the UAE? How much is it in America? How much is it in China? Is it relatively cheaper in Nigeria? How do we now, since we know that pricing, it seems to favor us in Nigeria, how do we use all of these advantages we have in pricing? Can we bring skills? Can we also bring in a foreign investor and make entry into Nigeria relatively easy for them and give confidence in terms of, even if we are going to do power shedding for some zone where power may be required, because even in India, there is no 24 hours power supply, but government has made policy to ensure that industrial zone certainly have consistent power supply that is enough to have output for the country. I believe we can repeat the same in Nigeria.
Hearing you talk about how relatively cheap labor is, it perhaps makes sense if organized labor is asking for as much as 200% increase in the minimum wage. But let's talk about the fact that President Tinubu just left the UAE, where you are, and it's not yet clear how soon the deal is struck with the country will materialize, particularly in the lifting of travel ban. But can you confirm that work permits are now being given to Nigerian women there?
Well, just before the arrival of President, the Nigerian community, some of us here, have continued to push because for every 100 Nigeria, there are few heads out there who continue to damage our reputation as a people. So work permits have been issued for Nigerian women, even Nigerians that have their work permit before or they are changing jobs. In some instances, after police checks and all of those things, it is renewed for them. In fact, residency is also renewed for some Nigerians that we have heard and we have spoken with. But what is the challenge now is that the UAE government seems to have classified Nigerian below age 40 as potential risk because of some of the things that we saw on social media. It trended on social media last year. We also have concerns about some trade relations, which we believe that government at high level can handle with them. We have also seen in the media here in the UAE, where authorities have said they are having conversation with Nigeria authority, and they believe that this collaboration will yield some very few individuals that continue to launder our image and make us come out in bad light. And I'm very hopeful.
Talked about of Nigerians below 40 in the UAE, but we're counting on the agreement the president reportedly had with the president of the UAE and looking forward to how that will impact on the quality of life of Nigerians living there. Economist, SPM professionals Paul Alaje joined us live from the United Arab Emirates. Good to hear you.
Thank you so very much for having me.
We're turning our attention to the southeast, where the Chief of Army Staff is saying sit-at-home order has now ended. That's after this break. You're watching Beyond 100 Days. Sit-at-home order in the southeast has ended. That's coming from the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Taoreed Lagbaja. He stated this in the nation's capital during the Chief of Army Staff combined second and third quarter conference, where he affirmed that the menace ended due to the heightened efforts of troops in collaboration with relevant stakeholders. On insurgency, the Army Chief said the activities of Boko Haram and other terrorists have been curtailed, adding that residents of the troubled state have now commenced commercial activities.
Focus will be against banditry, kidnapping and other related crimes in the northwest, the insurgency and the terrorism in the northeast, farmers herders clashes, kidnapping in the north central, the insurrection that is brewing in the southeast, and even economic sabotage and associated crimes in the south-south region. So we're not going to leave any of these zones unprotected or without attention.
Chief of Army Staff Lieutenant General Taoreed Lagbaja there. I'm joined now by National Publicity Secretary of Ohanaeze Ndigbo Worldwide, Chidozie Ogonia, who joins me live from Enugu. Thank you for joining us on the program. Can you confirm indeed that the sit-at-home has ended, particularly in Enugu where you are?
I will inform that sit-at-home is no longer as it was in the past. People are relaxing on the idea of sitting at home. On the other hand, people are getting on to work now in Enugu. And when this started, people thought it was the right thing to do. But over time, they have realized that it's like facing the barrel of the gun to yourself, facing the barrel of the gun inwards. They discovered that it's affecting the economy, it's affecting the social life, it's increasing on insecurity and the rest of them. So many people are no longer even interested in the sit at home. So by the time the governor of Enugu pronounced that the sit at home should come to an end, many people embraced it. But even at that, some people are still a little afraid. But ultimately, every Monday, there is a social economic activity in Enugu State.
So we hear that this progress is a function of efforts of troops in collaboration with relevant stakeholders. You talked about the governor's instruction of sealing up shops that refuse to open on Mondays. But let's try to x-ray why you think people refuse to open their shops at some point. Was it the fear factor or solidarity to the IPOB philosophy?
Yeah, initially, by the time it started, it was a solidarity. There was no doubt. But shortly after, by the time IPOB even said they were no longer issuing the sit-at-home order, the people were prepared to come out for their business. But non-state actors who took over the place, some miscreants took over the place. So people were afraid, not because they didn't want to go to work or didn't want to open their shops, but they were afraid of the consequences of coming out. The non-state actors that went on, enforcing the sit-at-home were more than the official security operatives. So it became a problem on the sit-at-home days. You would see any people, but like I said, what is the more important is consciousness of the people. Initially, the consciousness was like in solidarity. But later on, the consciousness changed. People began to think better, that is not even to any person's advantage. So by the time the governor pronounced it, all of them came out en masse, demonstrating support. So you can see that it is possible that one may claim, like security operative may claim they did that. But more importantly is that the consciousness of the people was also essential in promoting the exercise at all points. It was an important factor in the sit-at-home, and also the consciousness of the people was an important factor in stopping the sit-at-home.
What has now happened to the activity of these non-state actors you've talked about? Many of them who reportedly do not subscribe to the philosophy of the sit-at-home in the first place.
When I mean consciousness, it permeates across board. Like there were people who were enforcing it, but later on they came to realize that they were doing themselves. They came to realize that they are not doing themselves and their relatives any good. But initially they were enforcing it, but when I mean the consciousness, it permeates all the strata of society. So those people who are even enforcing it, we are part of the people who are now saying it should no longer be enforced. I hope you understand.
I hear you, Mr. Ogonia. I was even going to ask about the activity of the non-state actors, those who foment trouble and cause violence in form of killings and abduction. Can you tell if that has reduced drastically with the operations in the field?
That's what I'm trying to explain, but try to understand me.
Yes.
Everything depends on the consciousness, the understanding of the people. I hope you understand. Initially, it was like IPOB to support Nnamdi Kanu, sit at home. But later on, even when they know they support Nnamdi Kanu, the thinking of average Igbo now is no longer sitting at home. That's what I mean by consciousness. When I say average, including non-state actors, are part of the society. So they also began to realize that it's not necessary enforcing the sit at home. So it is like an understanding has gone through all the strata of the society that the issue of sit at home should stop. That is doing nobody any good. So that's what I'm saying. So what used to be non-state actors, apart from the fact that they have been curtailed, some of them have also relaxed their enthusiasm in the sit at home because it's a new understanding.
All right.
I hope you understand.
I hear you, Mr. Ogbonia. Let's quickly talk about Nnamdi Kanu. He reportedly wrote a letter to Sam Ekpa instructing the sit-at-home to end and declaring Mondays economic empowerment days. I'm wondering if you can confirm that story. But on the contrary, we understand that Mr. Ekpa has continued its violent approach in the secessionist movement. How significant or strategic is Nnamdi Kanu's release to the continuing peace in the Southeast?
Okay, you asked two questions. Let me see if I can take the two. When you talk about Simon Ekpa and Nnamdi Kanu, evidently Nnamdi Kanu has more followership than Simon Ekpa. So people who sympathize with Nnamdi Kanu are more in number than the followers of Simon Ekpa. So at any time there's a conflict of directives between Ekpa and Nnamdi Kanu, evidently the one of Nnamdi Kanu will overwhelm the one of Ekpa. So even when two of them might be saying the same at a point, but the difference is clear about the followership of Nnamdi Kanu and the followership of Simon Ekpa. So that one is yeah. So you asked another question about.
I was asking if the release, if Nnamdi Kanu's release would be instrumental to, a more permanent peace situation in the Southeast.
Yes. Yeah, let me put it this way. People quickly misunderstand what is happening in the Southeast. You see, what people are talking about is that it has been an orchestrated alienation and migration of people from the centers of power and authority. It's very regrettable. It's also, you find that the policy framework of the central government is tilted against the people of the Southeast. Look at what happened the other time. They are all, in fact, all the military personnel, the military, paramilitary, and so on, the security operatives, no chief executive was allocated to the Southeast. So, in fact, even the ministries, no grade A minister was also assigned to the people of the Southeast. Even the time when they say, when we know that the zoning and the rotation of power have become entrenched in the political norm of Nigeria, when it was said to be turned on the South, we saw the kind of politics that associated with it. So people are angry about some of these things. So what you find about Nnamdi Kanu and the agitation is an expression of reality on ground. And that is why it's difficult. So to stop it, for example, is to stop promoting nepotism, to stop promoting what all forms of policies against the people of Southeast. Come to the rules in the Southeast, they're all dilapidated. There's no serious thing going on to show that they are part of the country. You will hear somebody carrying railway line to the Niger Republic, where there's no railway line in the Southeast. A lot of things that are obviously against the people of Southeast. So what you find in Nnamdi Kanu, that is expression of reality on ground.
I hear you, Mr. Ogbonia.
So the agitation, yeah. Now let me answer it now. So when you release Nnamdi Kanu, for example, the agitation was because they see Nnamdi Kanu as a symbol.
Mr. Ogbonia,
economic reality on ground.
I want you to wrap in about 30 seconds because we have to go now. All right, Mr. Ogbonia.
So I've expressed it.
That's pretty much our time on the program. We probably will continue this conversation some other time as we look forward to exploring some of the engagements, the government engagement in that part of the country. National Publicity Secretary Ohaneze Indigbo Worldwide, Chidiozie Ogbonia, thank you for talking to us live from Enugu State. That's our program this evening. Thanks for being a part of it. You can watch it again at midnight and at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I am Nifemi Oguntoye.